Happy Friday, everyone. Welcome to episode number 8 of the Podcast of Surprise. I'm super excited to be here. I hope you're all having a fantastic week so far. And I'm joined by my amazing co-host today. We're really excited to be finishing off The Last Wish. We're going to be discussing The Voice of Reason, our last analysis. Our last short story, guys. So thank you, everyone in the live chat for joining us. But without further ado, before we get into the discussion, I would like to introduce my co-hosts, Michal and Aziz. What's going on, Michal?
Hey, not too much. Glad to be here. Really excited that we finished book 1.
We survived. We're still here.
Yeah, it's a fun milestone to hit. This book was fun. I really enjoy rereading the story. I know I hadn't read it as a standalone, and I think it really raised its profile. It made it stand out rather than being part of the others. So yeah, I'm excited to talk about this one too.
Michal is the voice of reason. As you can see, our nicknames, we changed those up for every podcast. I would agree with that. Also, the voice of dissent on Nivellen. We also have the voice of Aziz On, and I'm Kyle Iola. Apparently, I'm lusting for Geralt. But for those of you that are joining us today,
you needed therapy.
Well, I need a big
of silence, though. Apparently.
This is going down the shitter real fast. Anyways, everyone, for those of you that know, we have 2 different versions of the podcast. We have this live version, which we do, and we discuss everything live chat. And then we also have an amazing version that's downloadable on Anchor. You can actually find the link to all of our podcast episodes in the description of the video for Aziz and Michal, all of their social media and all of that. But yeah, we have a nice playlist of episodes on Anchor. They are a great sponsor, and they really give us an awesome platform to basically advertise all of the different listening platforms like Spotify, iTunes, and yeah, just a great spot to have a playlist for a podcast like the Pod of Surprise. So Aziz, we have a list of supporters on Anchor who have hit that support button.
Thank you to Mara Lee, Andrew G, Ryan B, Sam D, James G, and those anonymous folks whose names we don't know but appreciate just the same.
Of course, you don't have to support the podcast, but if you do, we really appreciate that. It starts at $1, which is a little bit less than a cup of coffee, $5, and I believe $10. So everyone that's supporting us,
$5 is also a little bit less than a cup of coffee, depending on where you live.
I was just actually showing this Aziz earlier. I hadn't had coffee for a few days. I'm like, I had this, and I'm like, I don't know if it was a good idea for me to drink this much coffee. It's like Aziz is like, Kyle, you're like in another dimension right now. It's like you're vibrating. Anyways, you'll see an energetic pod today. Really awesome. Just want to give a shout out to a few names in chat. Macro, I see that you're able to join us today. Jacqueline Sandwich, Jormungandr. We have Kate Bertinsky. I believe Moralee's in there. Rick Hoppy. Ryan Burns is finally able to join us on a Friday. I think he's not been able to join us live. We have a couple of people first time tuning in. Leo Jetko Muter. I hope I'm saying that correctly. Welcome to the Podcast of Surprise live chats. Anthony Shaddix. And I think I got to everyone. So if I left you out, just yell at me in the chat, and I will give you a shout out.
Cool.
So shall we start the podcast off with a quote, Michal?
Yes, we shall. This is, by the way, one of my favorite quotes from the entire book. Don't you think? Sorry. Don't you think? He smiled. That my lack of faith makes such a trance pointless. No, I don't. And do you know why? No. Neneke leaned over and looked him in the eyes, with a strange smile on her pale lips. Because it would be the first proof I've ever heard of that a lack of faith has any kind of power at all.
That is such a good line. I agree. I love that line. It works out so nicely when the line we pick as our favorite also fits for the opening quote. That's nice. Thanks.
And the theme of the whole book, one of the big themes.
Yeah.
That is true.
And Aziz will give us the beautiful synopsis as always.
Yeah, this synopsis is extra fun because it has to be pulled together from all the different parts rather than just a straight shot through the story, so that's a little fun. Geralt the Witcher is sleeping, recovering from that nasty neck wound given to him by the Striga in the very first story. In comes Iola, a young and promising acolyte priestess who has taken a vow of silence. She wants to sleep with Geralt, and as often And as he often does with a woman interested in him that isn't Yennefer, he readily accepts, but thinks of Yennefer.
With shame, he realized he felt resentment towards her, resentment that she had remained a dream, and that he would never forgive himself for it.
Neniki, High Priestess of Melitelli, enters the room, and Geralt worries he's gotten the girl in trouble. But this is perhaps projection of his guilt. Neniki reminds him what he already knows.
Fool, the priestess snorted. You've forgotten where you are. This is neither a hermitage nor a convent. It's Melitelli's temple. Our goddess doesn't forbid our priestesses anything. Almost. She
tells Geralt of Iola's vow of silence, but gently mocks him for wanting an explanation that he wouldn't understand anyway, given his negative views on religion and faith. She also questions him on how he could be so slow as to allow an ordinary Striga to nearly kill him. He thinks back to his arrival at the temple. In his mind, the wound was almost healed when he arrived, but Neniki's treatment weakened him. He doesn't question this, assuming that perhaps without her, his neck would not have healed properly. He holds her in very high esteem and visits once or twice a year. But Neniki is trying to get him to stay at the temple for longer this time. She tells him not to fight any agile opponents for a while, that it will take months for him to properly recover. He laments that he can't go that long without working, though it occurs to me that she's not charging him for his stay, so it sounds like he can wait that long. But anyway, Neniki very much wants Geralt to be put under a trance. She brings it up for what is not the first time. She senses something about him, but he's very much against it, playing it off as a waste of time, saying he'd be happy to confide in her about what he's been up to, but insistent that it isn't anything out of the ordinary for a Witcher. Neniki knows this isn't true because she knows about Yennefer and Geralt's relationship, that it's anything but ordinary. So there's something more, and we know for certain that the events in A Question of Price were extraordinary to say the least. It seems Neniki is sensing the child of surprise and the destiny associated with that fateful commitment, but she doesn't know the specifics. If Geralt were to go under trance, the secret would very likely come out, if not other things. In general, he just doesn't want to do it. The next we see, some knights from the Order of the White Rose have arrived, and they are very uppity indeed. It seems their patron duke, or prince, hereward, depending on who you ask, is exerting his authority. These two knights seem quite intent on exerting theirs as well. They want Geralt to leave. Now. This is the kingdom of Temeria, ruled by King Foltest, and at this time his heir is, well, a girl only recently transformed from a Striga. The nobility are not exactly comfortable with this, one can surmise, and let's not forget, Foltest has no other children. So this Duke Hereward, by calling himself prince, is perhaps angling towards becoming heir to Temeria or something like that, despite, as Neniki points out, his lack of royal blood. Titles aside, there's a problem with the order's orders.
In this temple, I give the orders, interrupted Neniki in a cold, authoritative voice. I usually try to ensure my orders don't conflict too much with Hereward's politics, as far as those politics are logical and understandable. In this case, they are irrational, so I won't treat them any more seriously than they deserve. Geralt, Witcher of Rivia, is my guest. His stay is a pleasure to me, so he will stay in my temple for as long as he wishes.
The younger but more uppity knight turns as red as his cloak, and arguments and threats begin to fly. The knight, reminding her of the strength and dignity of his order, while she points out the dangers of going against the temple's popularity and reminds him that she delivered him when he was born. Geralt plays ambassador, saying it's not to worry over, that he's planning on leaving in only 3 days anyway, and surely that will suffice. But he is wrong, and knows it before the older knight responds, because the Witcher sees his eyes, and they are full of hate. So much so that he considers that it might be these men, and not the Duke, who wants him gone after all. And perhaps they are used to getting what they want. It turns out the younger knight is one of the Duke's favorites. The issue is pushed further, but Neniki won't back down. The younger knight's voice breaks into falsetto as he takes offense and begins to berate her. Geralt is far more willing to take insults on his own person than he is to see them aimed at Neniki, and adopts a threatening tone instead of his former conciliatory one. He insults the order, claiming all as it takes is money to get in.
Tails?
I don't know how to say that name, yeah.
Tailies.
Sure.
Tailies, his hand. Sorry. It's the last day of school, guys. Just, humor us. Tailies, his hands shaking pulled an iron gauntlet from his belt and with a crash threw it to the ground at the witch's feet. "I'll wash away the insult to the order with your blood, mutant," he yelled. "On beaten ground, go into the yard." "You've dropped something, son," Neneki said calmly. "So pick it up. We don't leave rubbish here."
The knights leave, but promise to return. Later, Geralt sits alone with Iola and speaks to her as if to a therapist. He tells her of his beliefs, how his faith resides in the sword. He tells her of how his swords are made and of his relentless training, how he considers his mentor his father because he doesn't know much about his own birth parents. That he was exceptional in surviving the mutations caused by the trial of the grasses, that eldritch and painful process that turns boys to witchers. So, of course, they pushed him harder and gave him and the few others who made it this far ever more.
They were worse, much worse. But as you see, I survived. The only one to live out of all those chosen for further trials. My hair's been white ever since, total loss of pigmentation. A side effect, they say. A trifle.
He describes his first encounter after finishing his training that he was eager to slay monsters. He came across a gang and slew their leader as he was assaulting a young girl. The rest ran off, but instead of thanks, she threw up, then fainted when he got closer. That taught him a lesson. He didn't get close anymore, and he stuck to killing literal monsters. Until Blaviken. Then Iola reaches to touch him, and he quickly pulls away.
"Don't touch me. You might see. And I don't want you to. I don't want to know. I know my fate whirls about me like water in a weir. It's hard on my heels, following my tracks, but I never look back."
He admits that it is indeed Sintra that Neneki is sensing, that the child must have been born by now, and that her birthday, like Yennefer's, would be around Beltane. He knows fate is drawing him south, but he doesn't want to admit it and doesn't want to know what he will do. Knowing the future is no boon, no advantage at all. The next we see, Geralt is reading a well-known history book, and Dandelion arrives for a visit. He'd heard about the Striga and that Geralt was wounded, and knew that he'd come to the temple to heal up. They proceed to drink some booze together and philosophize. It's a wonderful conversation about how things change, how values change, and how, in particular, Geralt's profession has changed as a result of those larger civilization-level forces at work. Dandelion points out very aptly that witchers are slowly putting themselves out of business by doing a good job.
This land had to be taken from them bit by bit, every valley, every mountain pass, every forest, and every meadow. And we didn't manage that without the invaluable help of witches. But those times have gone, Geralt. Irrevocably gone. The Baron won't allow a Forktail to be killed because it's the last Draconid for 1,000 miles and no longer gives rise to fear, but rather to compassion and nostalgia for times past.
However, he says, this is not true everywhere. Many places where humans live have great need of witchers still, and will so for quite a long time. He suggests they head south together. Geralt, of course, is against that and makes his excuses. That would be looking back, which he claims to not do. The south, after all, is Sintra and Sodden Hill. Dandelion, unaware of any of this about the south, Sintra, or the Child of Surprise, moves on to reminiscing about their first adventure together, which was not in the south. The next we see, Geralt is chatting with Nennehy again, this time inside a fascinating cave or grotto designed to grow rare specimens of plant and moss and such. She corners him again about leaving, guessing correctly that he's worried Yennefer will show up, as she does at the temple from time to time. Nennehy tells him that he doesn't know her as well as she thinks he does, or women in general. They discuss that sorceresses cannot conceive children, and Nennehy says Yennefer is no exception in regards to reversing the damage done to her reproductive system, which Geralt struggles to accept. She also tells him he needs to stay longer. He's slow, wounded, and distracted. The therapy was doing him good, and he needs more. She continues to push for the trance and for him to stay, but he still won't do either. She settles instead on hearing how Geralt and Yennefer met.
The Witcher smiled. It started with me and Dandelion not having... Dandelion... The Witcher smiled. It started with me and Dandelion not having anything for breakfast and deciding to catch some fish. Am I to understand that instead of fish, you caught Yennefer?
As they leave, he asks her to confirm that in this room are plants that no longer grow anywhere else. She confirms it's so, and that this is due to changes to the environment and the sun's rays. The crystal roof blocks those harmful rays, confirming that the cave that they're in is essentially a greenhouse. Geralt is outside the temple with Dandelion shortly afterwards, and oops, not only do we have the two knights, but a dwarf named Dennis Cranmer, captain of the Duke's Guards and a real stickler for the rules. And the rules are not very friendly. Geralt must duel Talles, and must not strike the young knight or else be hanged. They want the knight to be able to claim he defeated a Witcher. They tell him he has no choice. Geralt reminds them that he does have a choice after all. Dennis Cranmer takes his meaning, and rather than meet Geralt's threat with bravado, he reminds him of Blaviken and asks if he wants a repeat of that on his conscience. He does not, and instead accepts the duel. Dennis Cranmer's bearing has convinced Geralt that he does in fact have yet another way out. By hitting Tyus' sword back into his own face, he wins on a technicality, having not actually struck the knight directly. Nevertheless, wisdom dictates they not press the issue. It's time to go. They have to stop by the temple to get their things, and Geralt asks Dandelion to keep quiet about what just happened. As he's saying his farewells to Neneke, Iola comes forth bearing a small chest filled with Witcher elixirs and medicines for him. She has the urge to speak, to break her vow, but does not. As she hands the chest to him, their hands brush and...
Blood, blood, blood. Bones like broken white sticks, tendons like whitish cords exploding from beneath cracking skin, cut by enormous paws bristling with thorns and sharp teeth. The hideous sound of torn flesh and shouting, shameless and horrifying in its shamelessness. The shamelessness of the end, of death. Blood and shouting, shouting, blood, shouting. Yola!
It's a trance. Neneke yells for her to speak of what's happening despite her vow, but she does not, and the convulsions continue. She casts a spell, and Geralt feels through his medallion that it is a powerful one. The other girls carry her away, and Neneke says she will be with them in a moment to provide further aid. She's hopeful this incident will change Geralt's mind, but it does not. He's determined to leave, and again, to not look over his shoulder. However, he's clearly affected by what's happened, as indicated by his sweaty palms. Mother Neneke, Venerable One, wipes away a tear as they part, perhaps wondering if she will ever see him again. Geralt and Dandelion head south.
So really, really interesting story, question mark. We're going to talk about that in just a second. Thank you very much for the synopsis there. Before we go forward, we actually have two donations. We have, I'm scrolling up here, one from Morley. To my 3 favorite YouTubers, love you and The Witcher. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Mara.
Thanks, Mara.
Thank you.
We love you. Actually, can you hear the soundboard right now? Yo, Witcher. Oh, valley of plenty, oh.
Iola.
A random humanity. I won't play it again because Michal will kill me. But Amy Blackfire also says, tossing a coin to my YouTubers. Love the new map, Aziz. Great reading, Michal and Aziz. And keep up the good work, Kyle. Thank you. Also, people have been noting the map behind you, Aziz. You want to talk a little bit about that before we get into the discussion?
Absolutely. Good call. Thanks for pointing that out, Amy, and thanks for the donation. We have, this is Michael Klarfeld's map. If you guys have followed the History of Westeros podcast or a lot of other shows these days have Michael Klarfeld stuff. His stuff is so great that it's really making the rounds. And he's recently teamed up with our friend Chuck Lazarow. Chuck is a friend of ours who's gone viral for his cosplays before. He runs a site called Fanamaniacs. It's Fan-A-Maniacs. And where you can purchase these. He's basically taken Michael's work, his artwork, and puts them on things like these great maps or blankets. I got a blanket that's a little harder to see that's kind of sitting behind me, hanging off the couch. You can put them on mugs, or he made me a History of Westeros face mask, a COVID mask. So you can find a lot of things and custom order them as well. So it's great spot. Our friend Chuck wanted to shout him out, as well as Michael.
If you want to grab a link to that, Aziz, you can grab a link for Chuck's site. I also have a link to all of Michael's map work and all the stuff he does in the description of the video. He's also the person who did our intro with the cool map and the Temeria and the moving and all of that. So Michael, we really, really appreciate that. And so people, Aziz will get a link for you guys, and you can find the link to claridox.de, the link in the description of the video. So one thing that's really interesting about the Voice of Reason that I love about it is the chapters Voice of Reason are kind of the frame of the story, and we get all the short stories since we're at the end now, and that's kind of Geralt recounting his journeys and his time across the continent. What were your impressions of the Voice of Reason story ?
I mean, I like this more on reread. I think the first time I read it, I was more interested in this plot line than I was in the like ongoing stories. And I was kind of like, okay, let's get back to the main plot. And then kind of once you look at it overall, you kind of see how it all plays out. I don't know if it is a story as Kyle suggested, because I mean, it does have theme and it does have consistent character, but it is also kind of there to do the whole, like, you know, harp music in the background. And then one time
Yeah.
You know what it kind of feels like? It feels kind of more like someone going to a wellness retreat. You know what I mean? And it's kind of like disassociated thoughts from different times. He keeps on going back to this wellness center to kind of heal his wounds. And because we know that Witchers have very dangerous jobs, obviously. And that's what it kind of feels like to me, is like Geralt's kind of refreshing there. He's refreshing his physical self and also his mental self. And Neneki and the others are kind of trying to help him.
That's a great way to put it. Yeah. And I almost think of like an episode of a TV show where it's where they look back at their previous episodes and they have to write some connective tissue to go between to go. And then like you said, Michal, like I remember that time when, and then they go do that,
like a new season of Game of Thrones when they had the recap at the start of the season.
Yeah, it's kind of like that, or like a full episode where it's a clipped episode, like a clip show, but it's not a clip because it's the whole story. But it's a similar sort of format, except it's a really good version of that, because I think the three of us somewhat agreed that reading it as a whole separately really makes it a lot stronger. I wouldn't say it's super strong, but it's very fun and it's very important. The story elements are certainly not the strongest parts. It's not the plot is the weakest part, but it's got great dialogue, really good lore, and it's got Dandelion and Geralt together. It's got Neneki. Yeah, the characters are excellent, and the dialogue is excellent.
More so focused on the characters as opposed to like the plot, like the fairy tale short stories. One thing that I do want to point out that Aziz did for everyone, and it's really awesome. You can go to the Facebook page, The Podcast of Surprise, and Aziz actually made a document, and he put everything in order and written it into a Google document for everyone to share. So if you want to read it like that, because it is kind of hard going through all the different pages and trying to catch up with everything, and Aziz did that. Obviously, we work on a document and stuff that we want to talk for the podcast, but if you guys do want to go check that out, go to the Podcast of Surprise Facebook page, and Aziz was kind enough to do that for all of us. If you want to go read it. Yeah,
just took me like 5 minutes. Makes it easy. Yeah.
So yeah, I see Michal. Michal, what's up? I see you grinning there.
Oh no, I mean it's just interesting to me, like the way this it's such an interesting and unique, and I guess like Sapkowski does not give a fuck way to start a series. You know what I mean? Like he doesn't care. And I mean, I'm sure there are definitely fans who know the chronology of like when The Voice of Reason was written versus, you know, each individual story and how they were pieced together. But like, you know, from this like long past perspective, when you're just sitting down and it's like, okay, this is the first book in The Witcher, and you just like start reading it, and you know, it's such a contrast, right? Because it starts with like, I think I actually cracked up the first time I started it was like, everybody was like, you gotta read these books, they're so great, oh my god, you're gonna love them, the female characters are awesome. And it starts with nameless woman rubs her breasts over her face.
Yeah,
and I was just like, okay. Then in the next one you get Neneki, and it's like, oh, okay, hang on, I'm confused, like where are we going here? And I mean, Neneki, in my opinion, is like an MVP of the whole series. Like she's just so fantastic. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it is. I think this is part of the reason why it's not so easy for everyone to get into The Witcher, because he just does whatever he wants, you know, and like it just takes its time and is going to tell the little stories it wants to tell, and like weave other stories around it, and then like, you know, you can't make Andrei Sapkowski do what he does want to do, I think.
One thing that was really interesting that we had in our conversation before we got to do our document for the podcast and all that, we were kind of talking about each book and the theme of each book. And, you know, obviously The Last Wish is a collection of short stories, and so is Sword of Destiny. But we kind of equated Sword of Destiny to Geralt's relation, like being more of Geralt meeting Yennefer and his relationship with Yennefer. And this is kind of the lack of that. You know what I mean? And that's one thing that is really specific that Geralt is speaking about a lot in these conversations with Neneki and these other people, right? Because this is, we talk about trauma, right? There's like trauma as a theme, love, being apart from someone that you love. And we know that obviously that, you know, the TV show, they're kind of doing the 3 POV thing with Yennefer, Ciri, and Geralt. But this is kind of more of a Geralt-centric book, right? And then we get more into the other stuff. And this is kind of a little bit of a tease forward to some of the stuff that we're going to expect, because Iola has premonitions that death is going to follow Geralt because of the quest and his destiny and all of the stuff that he's going to experience in the future. And this is kind of like the origin story of us kind of getting to understand Geralt's past and before we really move into the main plot, I guess.
I think that's a great way to put it. Yeah, because you're right that the story is much stronger overall when all these characters are present and they're not all there yet. Like, we don't even have Ciri. Yennefer has been in one story so far, and her presence is about to, you know, jump up quite a lot the next batch of stories, and then even more in the main series. So that's really good. But yeah, so this story is more of like getting us set. It's necessary groundwork. It helps set the chronology. It's kind of interesting to realize we just read 7 stories, and the first one was the most recent one. So it is like, oh, well, yeah, okay. So these stories weren't in order. So it almost for some people probably it helps straighten things out, but for some other people, like, wait, that wasn't in order. They thought they were reading stories in order, and they're like, oh, those weren't in order. So it might actually make some people feel a little confused.
In comparison to the first season, Aziz, we got the people that were a little bit confused by the timelines, and we didn't get any of the stuff in the first season. So if we maybe had this kind of constant going back to Geralt at the temple and then him telling stories, that might have been a little bit easier for people to understand. But we got, of course, the stories in the different timelines, which people kind of had to catch on for themselves, right? So the voice of reason is kind of like you said, the framework of the story, and then we kind of get all the other short stories.
Hey, Ludmilla in the chat says she read The Witcher 5 to 6 years before The Voice of Reason. So that gives us, I wasn't able to find exactly when The Voice of Reason was published. I think it was 1993. I think it was written for The Last Wish to connect all those stories. So I don't think it existed prior to that, which would make sense. So yeah, 1993, and meanwhile, the first Witcher story, The Witcher, was 1986. So I guess it was about a 7-year gap between them, but I'm not 100% sure of that. So that's
and something I will say about The Voice of Reason is I think it definitely raises the stakes of the stories collectively, because we know, like, it's not just, you know, he meets this lady Yennefer and like, oh my God, they have this great connection. The end, you know, like we lead up to that with the impact of their relationship and the aftershocks of it. And then we follow the impact of it after. And I think the same thing, the fact that Blaviken comes back, you know, is very important to Geralt's decision in that final section. So I do think that this story elevates the other stories. I'm just always a little bit like, you know, you always have that little asterisk when you had those like clip shows. So I do think like
I agree.
You mentioned Blaviken, Michal, and one of the main things that we're going to talk about for themes today is faith. Geralt's faith is tested in humanity, the things that he experiences. He experiences all these traumas. He has to sacrifice Renfri, right? We see this early on in The Lesser Evil. And then he's kind of coming, like he's going to the temple to get fixed for these physical injuries, like the injury to his neck and stuff like that. Of course, that's changed in the show. But then we see the physical toll that all of these journeys have taken on Geralt and his traumas. And, you know, we find that he's much stronger not to spoil too much when he's around Ciri and Yennefer.
Yeah, and it sounds like Neneki understands that it's not just physical, that something, like she talks about how he's a little slower, that something's on his mind, and that's why she brings up Yennefer, because she thinks that's like maybe part of it, and it is part of it, but it's also this whole stuff with Ciri. Of course, he doesn't even know it's Ciri, it's just the child. He has no idea even whether it's a boy or girl or anything. So, but that's probably the main thing that's weighing on him, because it's making him question his faith a bit, because it's kind of like, well, maybe this is something to have faith over. It is certainly a destiny. It's not just random. It's not just, I'm going to go out in the world and continue to be a Witcher. No, there's more to it now. And that's just the way it is.
I mean, especially with oh, sorry, go ahead, Michal.
No, I think you could even say that like the two kind of pain points, the main pain points that Geralt has in this, in the Voice of Reason, kind of spring from faithlessness, like not being faithful, right? Like I maybe I'm wrong, but I still don't think we know exactly what happened, like why Geralt and Yennefer broke up that first time, but like he definitely left her, and like that's something that he's never gonna live down, to be honest.
No.
But like we get that here, and you know, Neneki's like, you behaved like a child, you know, you like abandoned her or whatever. And then the same thing, he's breaking his promise to go back to Sintra and to find the Child of Destiny. And like I wonder if that like plays into the idea of like why he's so resistant to responding to a point of faith, because he very practically, like, forget like spiritual things, he's very practically has been lacking in faith.
I think it actually leads to kind of the abandonment issue, his mother giving him up to be a Witcher. We see that with Lambert later on.
Oh, don't get me started on Geralt and his sads.
but think about some of the stuff Lambert starts to say later on. He's like, I never like, and Askel, and I never wanted this. You know what I mean? And I think Geralt has that fear. If he enters a relationship with someone, he's going to lose them because of his profession. Like, he doesn't like. We actually saw this in the episode where Geralt's mocking Yennefer in the show, where he says, "You think we'd be good fucking parents? Are you serious?" Like, you know what I mean? Like, they lead such dangerous lives, and I think Geralt feels some sadness because of that, because he is lonely. He is by himself most of the time, and he does want more. I think he does want more than that. He knows that, but he is afraid to make that commitment because he's afraid to lose that. And he regrets it too. He remember thinking about what he went through. He's like, what was I thinking? Like, why did I do that? It's you know, and I think part of it is he laments making the choice he did in Blaviken, but also he doesn't understand himself why he made that move during the Question of Price. Like, why did I tie myself to this? What was I thinking? Why do I want to make another Witcher? Why, you know, it's not such a great life. So, yeah, he's very conflicted over what he's done, and I think that's super interesting. Regret is said to be a wicked thing. It's something that is really hard. I have a lot of regret in my life, and that's something that I toggle with every day. I'm like, oh, I wish I could have done that better, you know? Regret is a wicked thing, for sure.
And he tries to handle it very, very stereotypically, as men do, try to solve problems when that's not the problem he should be solving, right? He tries to leave the money to help with her procedure, and Neneki's like rolling her eyes, like, dude, she doesn't need you to solve her problems. That is absolutely
trying to help him too.
From you.
She genuinely tried to help him too, like free of charge. Like, but Geralt has the transactionality in all his relationships because of he is a Witcher, right? So he's so used to that, and he isn't like when someone is giving him something genuine, he thinks it's a transaction because of all his transactions as a Witcher. I mean, he gets paid to kill monsters, right? He doesn't have all these strong relationships and a family. So it's something that's difficult for him.
Here's a question I have for everyone, for you guys, for the chat as well. Can you all read this quote and we'll get into it? About Yennefer's fertility.
Yes, absolutely. No one can help her. It's impossible. She's a sorceress. Like most female magicians, her ovaries are atrophied, and it's irreversible. She'll never be able to have children.
Not all sorceresses are handicapped in this respect. I know something about that, and you do too.
Neneki closed her eyes. Yes, I do.
So my first guess here is that the way it seems to be explained is that Yennefer, like pretty much every other sorceress, her reproductive organs were destroyed by the process. But I think what she meant is the exception is that some people don't have that corruption of their reproductive system. What she's saying, that's the exception, that some of them it doesn't break. There's no exception for recovering it, for restoring it, though. I think that's what she's saying. But I don't understand what the exception is, like who this person is. Is it Neneki herself? I don't know. But I think there's a mystery here, and don't know that it's ever resolved. So I'm kind of very curious about this part.
I'd like to hear Michal's thoughts on Geralt's mansplaining.
Well, yeah, I was a little bit like reading that conversation, like Geralt, he's just like, Neneki's like, it's impossible. And he's like, nuh-uh. And she's like, dude, I'm a priestess of a goddess of fertility. Stop mansplaining fertility to me.
Yeah, it's like Geralt. She's an expert, man.
She's a woman. Yeah.
She's not only a woman, but like a woman devoted to this specific thing. She's delivered like thousands of children, like probably literally thousands, because she's really old. She's known Geralt since he was a child, so she's old too, beyond normal human lifespan. So
you know that GIF where Captain Picard is like face palming? She's like doing that internally.
Yes.
Well, that's just Neneki constantly. She's just like, there's a certain point where like Geralt is like, I don't want to tell you about my feelings. Here's all my feelings. And you could just tell she's just like, shut up.
So is the explanation, I think Ryan and Ludmilla and some other folks here have posted that they're probably just talking about Vicenna, Geralt's mom, who was a sorceress / druid and still gave birth to Geralt. So that's probably it. Yeah, that makes sense. That's probably the fit. And I'm not sure if I guess that's just an admission that Neneki knows that, because she knew them both. So that fits pretty well. I guess that's probably it.
Yeah, I mean that does kind of contrast if they're talking specifically about Geralt's mother, with Neneki being like, I'm not your mother. I don't have to take care of you. Blah, blah, blah. Hang on, let me take care of you. Come out here, sit down, let me cut your hair.
It does flip-flop, right? Like when they're in the opposite position, Geralt's like trying to it's like these polar opposites that keep happening. It's
he's like, don't tell me what to do. And then he's like, Neneki, tell me what to do.
They can never be on the same page. It's either one or the other's trying to help the other.
Yeah, there's it is kind of funny because she's obviously very protective of him and very protective in general. That's her personality. She's a protector, like she's a high priestess of a temple here and of fertility. So but she is very protective of the types of ways she's helping. She's very helpful, but she's not going to help in ways that she doesn't want to help. She's like, I will help you a lot, but only in these very specific ways. Don't cross that line. Don't cross these borders. Don't question me, because I know my business.
Like, it's interesting because Geralt sees the prophecy or the trance that she's pushing for as something destructive. But I think Neneki sees it as something healing. And the thing that Neneki keeps pushing back against is any action that is destructive, right? So like Geralt, like going out before he's ready, or, other examples are escaping me, but just like, like they can't they can't have a duel in the grounds of the temple, because it's and I think
Geralt will just kill them.
Right.
That's true, yeah.
And I think that idea of like the Temple of Melitele and Neneki as its guardian being like these kind of avatars of preservation, and that requires backbone and being steely and not necessarily like just being like nice and cozy and whatever. I really like that idea, and I think that's an interesting way, considering the parental themes that continue on in the series. I think that's an interesting kind of first step along that path.
That's a great take. Yeah. Also, I mean, to add to that too, I think it's a very classic stereotype here. Geralt is like, I don't need therapy, and the protective mother figure's like, you should have therapy. And now in 2020, I think compared to 1993, I think this attitude is a lot more people are going to take Neneki's side here.
Yeah.
Maybe in 1993, a lot more people were like kind of both sidesism, like Geralt's got a point here. He doesn't need that. And he does have maybe some kind of point. He knows himself pretty well. But I side with Neneke overall because she's the expert. She's, she knows these things better than just about anyone. So I would tend to go with her take. But there's a little wiggle room. There's a chance she's wrong.
What's interesting too is Dandelion is kind of Geralt's psychiatrist. He's that other person that has, for right now at least in The Last Wish, going forward, obviously we know that he has stronger relationships with other people. But Dandelion is kind of that person who's trying to get Geralt to open up, and he does. But Dandelion tells him he's stupid. Essentially, he's like, "Hey man, like, you listen to me," But Geralt's stubborn, so.
Yeah.
So yeah, Geralt. So I guess we should talk about Dandelion's conversation as well.
Yeah, that's a really fun one. I love I think it's really clever the way it's written, and it reminds you, I think, that Dandelion's a poet. Like Sapkowski has to write his dialogue every once in a while. He has to be really evocative and just really eloquent, and quite often he is. And this is a good example. This is one of the high points of this story, I think, is their dialogue about the world changing. I think it's fantastic.
Climate change.
Yeah, they bring in that too. Of course, that's I guess Dandelion isn't super aware of that aspect of it, but I love that that's part of the story because obviously it's a big theme, and let's talk about that more in a minute too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I love that Dandelion is basically like, Geralt, you're the Crocs of Witchers, of magical pest control. You have one, you do too good a job, and nobody needs a new one. So
that's a good way to put it.
Oh, I love Dandelion.
I love his variety of excuses. Geralt's like to not go south, because I definitely did not have any idea what was going on with that the first time I read this. I just thought his reasons for not wanting to go south were what he said. He's like, yeah, the mosquitoes, the heat. Yeah, I don't want to go down there, but like, oh, that south is Sintra. That's why he doesn't want to go there. Right. So to me, that's a major reason why the reread of the story just raised it a lot, because of details like that, and not just in addition to the great dialogue that was present even the first time.
Agreed.
Should I bring up the faith and reason argument?
Yeah, that's a great one.
Yeah, so we were kind of thinking about what the themes were of this story, and obviously, like, you kind of can't avoid either reason because it's in the title, and it is one of those refrains. But also faith comes up as a point of argument between Geralt and Neneke, like, constantly through the story. And I kind of thought that those things could kind of be married in the idea that Geralt raises and that Neneke raises, and that something is ending. Because that is also a theme that will be played very strongly into the upcoming books. And I think it's kind of like the age of both faith and reason, which are often seen as opposites, are coming to an end in the doom that Geralt is avoiding. There's a strong kind of disillusionment and irrationality that comes over the continent in the following books. Not to get too specific, but things get dark and bad and like really intense.
The books are called Baptism of Fire and Time of Contempt. I mean, yeah.
It's really interesting too.
Happy sunshine days.
It's really interesting too, because Lauren Hisrich, the title of the first episode, exactly, something begins and then something ends, but also said that's one of the main themes of the whole series. And we're not going to tease too much about that because we are going to cover the main series as well, but it is something that is huge.
You want to keep it in your mind as you read for sure.
Yeah. And I kind of saw an echo in that, and maybe this is just me being an English major and just reading a little too much into it, but like the idea of like the greenhouse that, like, Neneke says, like the glass is protecting the plants and the parasitic oyster.
Flying fish, giant oysters. What else is in this goddamn? We got talking bears.
Does a plant have to be for Geralt of Rivia not to know what it is? I'm just like, but the idea is that, like, they're protected by this glass from like toxic rays. And Geralt's like, shouldn't we all like be wearing this stuff? And Neneki says like it's too late. And that to me also strikes me as like something of an ending. Like the time of opportunity has passed. We're already corrupted and we're kind of already on this path. It almost acts against what Neneki is saying, right? Like she's desperate for this trance to kind of, I think, give her answers to a question, because she wants to protect Geralt from whatever fate that is. And even as she's saying she wants that, like there's part of the story that's acknowledging that it's too late. It can't that can't happen. Fate has already, started on its path.
Which actually touches on Ciri and Geralt's relationship, which is basically the whole main. That's like the main plot of the books, and is touching on some of the prophecies that we sort of get into in Blood of Elves.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's going to be fun to dive into that. And that's a great segue to the climate change quote that we have here, which, by the way, I just want to give Sapkowski some credit for putting climate change in his series in 1993 or so. And that's pretty cool. I got to give him some props for that. Because it's obviously a great, like, not just to get into real world stuff, like that's a big thing to, like, a really interesting topic to have in a fantasy world, to see how like other worlds adapt and change because of it, not just because it's relevant to us too. I mean, it's both of those things. So let's have this quote.
All right. That's what I thought, Neneki smiled. You see, Geralt, this bright sun of ours is still shining, but not quite the way it used to. Read the great books if you like, but if you don't want to waste time on it, maybe you'll be happy with the explanation that the crystal roof acts like a filter. It eliminates the lethal rays which are increasingly found in sunlight. That's why plants you can't see growing wild anywhere in the world grow here.
I understand, nodded the Witcher. And us, Neneki? What about us? The sun shines on us too. Shouldn't we shelter under a roof like that?
In principle, yes, sighed the priestess. But
what?
It's too late.
Yeah.
A little foreshadowing there.
That's pretty powerful. Yeah, this story does have great dialogue. It really does.
Yeah.
So of course, while we're in this spot, I didn't go too crazy with the herb lore this time because there's so many.
At the document, and that's a complete fucking lie.
No. I'm not actually going to read this whole part.
Okay, I was going to say, I'm so down for it. I'm just like, yes. Like,
I put the whole quote in there just so I can refer to it.
Or make some coffee.
I swear this will be fast. Okay, so there's a huge list of different types of things. Most of them are made up. Reach, cluster, and antidote known to every toxin and venom. Some of them describe themselves. Scarix, a root with powerful and universal medicinal qualities. Done. That's it. Melalote normally is described as star-leafed. Normally, melalote has 3 leaves. So this is a 5-leafed version of melalote. This one's fun. Melalote translates to honey lotus. Lote is lotus, mela is sweet. Honey lotus, aka sweet lucerne, sweet clover, king's clover, heart's clover, plaster clover, or wild laburnum. Bees love it. Horses can eat it. In ancient times, juice dropped in the eyes from melalote cleareth the sight.
Also, the lotus in Eastern culture is if you find the middle of the lotus, you seek enlightenment. You get enlightenment, and that was practiced in Buddhism. So
that's the cleareth the sight. Yeah, that's the same thing.
And Melitalote, the temple of Melitele, a temple of enlightenment, perhaps. Interesting.
Nice. So here's where another piece of story, of world building and climate change stuff comes in, because they mention that there's some of the things grown in this room don't grow anywhere else in the world unless there's another greenhouse type place similar to this. Sapkowski included several species that are in the real world threatened by habitat loss. Arenaria, aka sandwort. There's lots of types of sandwort. Some of them are endangered. Cryptocorines, which sounds fake, but is aka water trumpet. It's often it's put in aquariums a lot, so it's actually quite common. Also endangered. Same with one of the other ones. I think it doesn't matter. Mousetail orchids. What's that?
Turtle duckweed?
No, turtle duckweed is definitely not endangered. Turtle duckweed is pond scum. It's so we've all seen that, and it's actually quite incredible. It grows like bamboo, and it has high protein content. There is significant effort right now in the scientific community in studying it as an environmental benefit or as a food source. Anyway, liverwort. What's that? I missed that. What'd you say?
Speaking of ducks.
Oh, yeah. There's also hornwort, which is also called coontail. So that's not a great nickname. You've definitely seen it. It's in aquariums all over the place. It looks like a miniature pine tree. So that's there. A liverwort, there's a billion types of liverwort. That's too generic to describe. Nematodes is cool because those are little plant-eating roundworms that are those are being used for eating, creating fertile soil. And puffheads, fast aim, measure me not, sockut, pond blood, raven's eye, hallucinogenic bitip, and suant mushroom appear to all be made up and sound cool. So that's it. That wasn't so bad. Had to get my herb lore in there. It's pretty cool.
You know when you say to yourself, I learned something today? I learned something today.
I thought the duckweed one was the most incredible to me. It's like pond scum, but they're actually studying this stuff like crazy. Like,
cool. Aziz, Macro bought a spurge plant.
What?
Oh my gosh, that's commitment.
That is so cool. Okay. Ludmilla just keeps getting cooler every time we have a podcast.
Ludmilla is our new favorite person.
Will you please post pictures of it in the Facebook group? Assuming they're not NSFW.
Actually, chat, can you all post pictures of plants in we're becoming a plant group podcast. Surprise.
Yes, if you have any pictures of, what is it? Hornwort or mousetail orchids, that's in there too. So, of course, it's very fitting to have all these plants from a goddess of fertility, right? So maybe we should talk a little bit about the lore and the trance and some of the things that Geralt talks about to Iola in his some of the cool magical stuff and all that business.
Yeah, Melitele and all that cool stuff. The religion. Do that.
The cult of Melitele was one of the oldest and, in its day, one of the most widespread cults from time immemorial. Practically every pre-human race and every primordial nomadic human tribe honored a goddess of harvest and fertility, a guardian of farmers and gardeners, a patroness of love and marriage. Many of these religions merged into the cult of Melitele.
Yeah, so she goes on to explain, or it's explained further, that many other religions have risen and fallen, but this one has persisted. It's explained pretty well. I thought it was a convincing explanation. I mean, fertility, that's humanity hasn't moved past the need for that, even now. So that it kind of makes a lot of sense. Dandelion's explanation is a little maybe less sophisticated, but probably not entirely without merit either. It's like, yeah, well, people do need things to yell out when they're in pain. Why not? That's true. It's a little basic, but there's a little bit of a point there. So that's kind of neat. So yeah, that's going to matter more.
Dandelion just goes for like the loudest option.
He's like, well, it's an expression. I'm a poet. I mean, of course I'm going to think about these things.
Is Dandelion always on knob 11? Can we discuss that?
Yes.
Hey, and especially when Geralt hands him a drink that's as strong as the plague. That's his real therapy there, drinking with Dandelion.
Always gets into trouble. So we have Geralt sleeps with Iola.
Yeah. He's thinking of Yennefer. She doesn't look anything like Yennefer. It's really like, wow, you really had to use your imagination there.
Freckles.
Yeah,
he still smells the lilac and gooseberries, man.
He just can't get away. Yeah. So, but there's some extra world building in here that's relevant in a way that hasn't necessarily come up. It seems like a small thing, but the idea of magic and virginity and prophecy is actually a recurring theme. Mostly it's superstition, a misconception. It's like there's a lot of people in the Witcher world that seem to believe that virginity is important for magic, and there's apparently only one exception to that. It's apparently not true except for only one exception, which is mentioned here, which is unicorns. Unicorns really are really attracted to or drawn to virgins for some strange reason.
They're horny?
Use the word
Get it? They're horny?
Oh, right. But that seems backwards. They should go to the anyone but the virgin. Anyway. So that I like that he
right now. I'm just staking my I am not saying the name of that unicorn that comes up later, okay?
I don't think any of us are.
Spoiler,
Remember in
if
our
you
private
don't
conversation, I tried to name it. You guys thought I was having a stroke, and I was like, I can't do that.
So I like that he kind of undoes that because it's an old, like, real world legendary trope. I think it does. Certainly, Sapkowski did not invent the unicorns and virgins trope, but he does certainly bash it a bit but with leaving one little piece.
Well, does that come? Isn't that in the Lesser Evil? I think, or when Geralt is talking to the worst Stregobor about like virgin's blood. Is that the thing? And he's like, "Oh, we don't need just virgin's blood, but we need to make it harder for people to get it. So we just say it's virgin's blood."
Yeah. I think there's a few other places that style that deconstruction of that's just what we say. Like in this story, Geralt just says, "Oh, I just tell people I'm from Rivia. I'm not really from Rivia," which by the way, makes that funny that in the very first scene of the first book, they are racist towards him because he's Rivian, but it's because of his fake accent, not because he's really from Rivia.
Then he proceeds to kill them.
Yeah, he's like, "I kill you, racists." Haha.
I mean, I'm not entirely sad about that, but whatever.
A little over the top, but not entirely. Yeah. So that's pretty neat that Sapkowski puts all this stuff, this world building in there. It comes up later. That's part of why it's relevant now and why we draw attention to it. So.
And Geralt is a unicorn in a sense of how unique he is.
And he too is attracted to Ciri in a non-romantic way.
Oh yeah, I mean, it's very true. He's drawn to her, and completely in a fatherly way. You're right, in a protective way. That's a good point.
Let's make that clear. I was a little bit scared there for a second, Michal. I was gonna have to nuclearize our podcast.
No, that is not a ship I ship. There are people who ship that ship and ship whatever you ship, but I do not ship that ship.
I think that is not. That's an exception to ship whatever you should ship.
Yeah, we're not a certain gross person that we hate from later on in the series.
Oh, thank you. But we will have plenty to say about him when he comes along. So another thing we'll talk about more when it's more. There's more detail on it later, so we'll hold off. But Kaer Morhen, he points out that's where the Witcher school is, where he's. It's called the Kaer Morhen school. It's called the Wolf School, which kind of explains his nickname because he got his hair is white and he wears a wolf medallion, so he's the White Wolf. Right? Very straightforward. It's also, I think, kind of implied, or at least you could imagine that the type of people that destroyed Kaer Morhen are similar to these, not the exact same people by any means, because this happened so long ago, but these Order of the White Rose types, like these guys who get all uppity about we're in charge, our culture is correct. And
religious zealots.
They're fairly zealous, and we do learn that it's apparently zealots that destroy Kaer Morhen at some point in the past. So we don't have a lot of detail on that even later, but it feels like a similar sort of application, or conceptually similar anyway.
It's funny because those people become extinct from Nilfgaard after, which is like kind of the opposite, you know what I mean? Because Nilfgaard is encroaching upon everyone on the continent. Yes. So it's kind of ironic that they're, destroying places like Kaer Morhen, like Aziz said, when Nilfgaard is the true enemy.
Yeah, speaking of the south, if they go a little farther south, then it's like, whoa, Sintra's south, but Nilfgaard is even farther.
Yeah, something I was thinking of in connection to Kaer Morhen is like how fond Geralt is of Vesemir, and obviously later on in the series we see more of this, but he's also talking about like, they fed me all these poisons and they forced me into this, and they, it's kind of like, well, was that not Vesemir? Like, was there like, there's a very strong sense of like an abusive relationship here, in that, like, I mean, Vesemir's complicated in that, like, yes, he was a father figure to these kids. He was also a father figure to all the ones that died horribly.
And he's also dedicated to making sure that Witchers continue.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
He's the one who keeps Kaer Morhen alive.
Yeah, and he's apparently like at least like thrice Geralt's age, something like that. It's undetermined, but yeah. So he's been doing it for a while. But you're right to point to the they in these phrasing, Michal, because yeah, who are these just other Witchers that are no longer around, or there were some sorcerers involved, or druids, or something like that? Because certainly the origin of Witchers involves some of this is explained later in the story, so we won't talk about specifics, but. Yeah, sorcerers invented this effectively. The first Witcher was an experiment. And so these are all you can see. They were continuing to experiment, and Geralt is the result of further experimentation, going deeper into this Trial of Grasses stuff. So he's like the pinnacle of that, and that it's not really a great thing to be as a human being because people call him mutant, and he is. Not when I say it, I don't mean it in a bad way. But certainly those Order of the White Rose folks meant it as a deep insult.
You know, what's interesting is we talk about fertility and fertility leading to life and being connected to all, growth. And one thing that's interesting is what we see when Ciri and Yennefer become parts of Vesemir's life and Geralt's life is growth from those characters when they experience a strong woman's power and love, right? That starts to change things around them when we see the impact of Yennefer, people of Yennefer, like Yennefer and Ciri, and the impact on those men, because they're around so many men. And Michal, you can speak to this. There is obviously an issue, in these kind of medieval times on the continent, there still is men generally, with the exception of Queen Maeve and a few others, are in positions of power. So it is interesting to see Neneki have an impact on Geralt.
Yeah, for sure.
I think it's a real world thing as well. Like if you go back to really, really ancient times, you see ancient religions were mostly run by women. And then I think the playing out of power games amidst civilizations moved that more towards men being like, we can take that. Whereas the women couldn't really take over war from men because it involved actual fighting. And it's just kind of the subsummation of power structures. Like power structures always try to eat other power structures, and
when
it seems like
gets involved in more.
Yeah, same exact thing. So it seems like you see this example of why Sapkowski has explained why this particular religion is still so powerful, and it's because of its popularity and because of its applicability. Which in our modern world, things have changed a lot, but certainly fertility goddesses are big in the real world.
Just to use an example real quickly, people who call themselves Christian and do un-Christ-like things, you know what I mean?
Yeah, perfect
For example, and anyways.
Well, that's, not to generalize too much, but that is, I believe, a theory about why women were primarily accused of being witches, because women were still, at the time where like witch trials were going on, were still kind of like rooted in that idea of like, you're the one with the spiritual power in the family. You're the one who can mix the potions. You're the one who can, poison your husband, and like that concept kind of carried through. It wasn't necessarily that like only women can do it, but it was rooted, I believe, at least partly in that concept of kind of an eldritch power that women had access to.
And if we're being like, we're getting really real here, having kids is the most amazing thing any person can do. Like as a man, I'm blown away that women can do that. So like, again, put yourself as like an ancient person thousands and thousands of years ago when there's very little, says like, that's impressive. New life comes out of women like that seems magical. So I can see why that like initial seed of an idea started amongst all human civilizations is like, well, holy crap, y'all can do that.
Well, the idea of God being a man, I mean, if we're talking about fertility and birth, wouldn't it make more sense if God was a female? You know what I mean? So having that argument,
ways, yeah.
That's we don't need to have that argument today. And I'm sure I see Michal smiling. She's like, hell yeah, I love that. Because fuck Nivellen. But anyways,
Mother Earth is a concept for a reason. But
It does make more sense, and in my opinion, anyways. But we're not gonna get. That's a whole nother podcast. Not on The Witcher yet.
Well, shall we move on to our? Do we have any other themes or style or lore or anything like that, or should we move on to our funny bits?
I just kind of wanted to talk a little bit more about faith and reason. Michal
Cool.
made such a great point in the document. It's something that permeates almost all of the stories, and definitely continues. We were talking about how excited we are to get into the main series. We're going to have to change up the structure of the podcast a little bit, but faith and reason are something that continues with Blood of Elves all the way until the end of the series. We are actually talking a little bit about the last book the other night on Wednesday. So it's something that people in chat, if you haven't read that far, it's something that continues as a main theme throughout the series. Reasoning, like making the right decision. Am I right or wrong? My faith in other people and myself. Those are some really big things in the series.
And I love to, just for folks who haven't read through all the way, those who have already know this, but Sapkowski mixes like academics, like his portrayal of academics with this world of magic and archaeology and history super well. It's one of my favorite aspects of the story that sets it out from other fantasy. So I look forward to going through that with my co-hosts and with y'all as well, because that is fun stuff.
Yeah. Michal, did you have another point on themes, lore, any of that?
No, I have nothing else smart to say.
I doubt
now
that
we'll go
very
into the
much.
funny section with all of our favorite quotes.
Yeah. Michal's already there, because that was clearly a funny, not
She's like, fuck you guys, I just want to laugh.
Okay, so here's this first one. Dandelion talking to Nanaki.
My deepest respects, venerable mother, he whined stupidly. Praise be the great Melitele and her priestesses, the springs of virtue and wisdom.
Stop talking bullshit, snorted Nanaki, and don't call me mother. The very idea that you could be my son fills me with horror.
He whined stupidly. That's so good.
That's like one of those things that you're not supposed to tell the audience, but like it just works.
He does that. Like, there's a couple other spots where he does that. Like, he gurgled more gurglingly. Like, at one point, like,
And it's usually associated with Dandelion's idiocy.
Yes. Occasionally it's somebody else, but it's very often Dandelion. There's another line just like that I couldn't find. It reminded, when he says "whine stupidly," I thought there was something just like that in Edge of the World, but I couldn't find it. But one day I'll think of it again.
Oh, this is another good one. Michal, you want to go, and then I'll do Dandelion again?
Yeah. I ride on, and I'm getting hungrier and hungrier. I ask around for work. Certainly it's there, but what work? To catch a Rusalka for one man, a nymph for another, a dryad for a third. They've gone completely mad. The villages are teeming with girls, but they want humanoids. Another asked me to kill a Mecopteran and bring him a bone from its hand because crushed and poured into a soup it cures impotence.
That's rubbish, interrupted Dandelion. I've tried it. It doesn't strengthen anything, and it makes this soup taste like old socks.
I've tried it.
I've tried it, he said. He's so pissed
It's like, wait,
about it.
so you have impotence? Is that
Yeah,
what
right.
you're saying? Is it you, Dandelion? Have impotence?
That's rubbish. He's so pissed about it. So she's so sure.
So good. Wisdom and inspiration. I see. Who pulled that one? Was that the one about?
That was mine, but I don't remember if it's Geralt or I think it's Dandelion who says it. That wisdom and inspiration are still to be found in the library.
That's when he pulls out the alcohol, right?
Yeah.
Geralt and Dandelion drinking together is always dangerous.
Yes, that is awesome though.
Pirouette count up by 1.
Oh,
I
yeah.
wanted to note. Finally, we have another pirouette.
Woohoo,
I was
pirouette.
like, this is gonna be a thing. We're gonna keep track. Until now.
I was going to do a pirouette, and then I saw the future like Iola, and my whole computer set was going to be destroyed.
Yeah, I would have destroyed this map probably if I tried to pirouette.
Former costume.
Also, the name ties. Thai. I think it's French. Thai, as in Thai.
Thai.
Yeah, I don't know if that's a pronunciation, but it looks like it's looking French to me as my French self. So
Okay, well, I'm American. I say
only speak American. Lols.
Tailless. Tailless.
Ties.
He's tailless. He has no tail.
Ties was writhing on the ground, spitting blood, whimpering and wailing. He didn't look pleased in the least.
Yeah, so and then Dennis Cranmer's like, nope, not doing that. And Falwick yells, Cranmer, you'll be sorry for this, I swear. And Cranmer's like, nah, don't perjure yourself. Don't perjure yourself. No, I will not be sorry for this.
I love Cranmer. It's great. He's our first dwarf that we meet, right?
I think so. And minor spoiler, we do see Dennis Cranmer again. Yes, not the most major character, but thankfully he does come back.
And then we have another one, Aziz. You want to read this one?
Yeah.
The Scar.
And the scar. And the scar? For a knight, a scar is a commendable reminder. A reason for fame and glory when the chapter so desired which the chapter so desired for him. A knight without a scar is a prick, not a knight. Ask him, Count, and you'll see that he's pleased. And that's when we get Tyus was writhing on the ground, spitting blood, whimpering and wailing. He didn't look pleased in the least. It's a good point, though. A knight with a scar, you should have scars if you're a knight, Jamie would agree.
Absolutely.
Oh, wow.
It's just like, oh, you want scars? Like,
we almost got through the whole episode without a Game of Thrones reference, and then it was me who threw up Jamie.
Usually I'm the one who's doing it.
Usually.
Now our reference.
We can't help ourselves.
By the way, in chat, how many of you would like to see in A Song of Ice and Fire Witcher comparison episode?
Yeah, we're getting pretty close to wanting to do that, I think. We got to figure out how to do that because there's so many ways to approach that. It's not a one episode thing, probably. We may do an overview and then do some specific character. Obviously, the Calanthe Cersei one is the biggest one we found so far, probably. But
I think next we're going to get into Sword of Destiny, but maybe after Sword of Destiny, we can do maybe we can record a bigger episode, and split it into two or something like that for A Song of Ice and Fire.
Yeah, we'll see how that's going. I'm excited to do that.
We can kind of let everyone in behind the scenes. We all work on documents together, and we all have quotes we put in, funny quotes, or Michal came up with the awesome faith and reason are the main themes that we kind of look at in the Voice of Reason. So we all kind of add a little bit of our own touch in there, and Aziz always comes up with the awesome synopsis, and I do the intro and outro. But we also add some Song of Ice and Fire stuff at the bottom of the page sometimes. So we'll go back and we'll try to collect all the stuff that obviously as a Song of Ice and Fire and Game of Thrones fans. And it's something that we're going to work towards. So, are we going to do Sword of Destiny next? Have we decided yet?
Yeah, we should. I think we've got time, and we want to get it locked down, and then it'll be glorious when we get to the main series, and we may have season 2 in between that. So that might be. We'll see how we'll see how the release schedule goes. Obviously, we have no idea when.
Well, this looking by next production. July is the expected.
Oh, July. Oh, okay, then we'll be done with Sword of Destiny by then for sure.
We'll be into Blood of Elves probably, and we'll have to do a couple of chapters at a time probably with Blood of Elves. We haven't discussed how we're gonna have to change a little bit because we do specifically one short story for the podcast, and then we're gonna have to kind of maybe do it more like a review style conversation as opposed to kind of more of the analytical fairy tale stuff that we're doing.
So here is a fantastic little anecdote that I discovered by accident last night. President Obama went to Poland in 2014, and he met with Prime Minister Donald Tusk. And of course, when these big world leaders meet, they always give gifts. And one of the gifts given to President Obama was a signed copy of The Last Wish. Yeah. How about that? I'm guessing he probably didn't read it. But if he did, that would be so cool.
And by the way, when I first read that, because I'm dyslexic.
She rubbed her breasts over. Oh,
he's like, all right, never mind.
And when I read that at first,
or he's like, wait.
I thought it was Donald Trump because of my dyslexia. And I'm like, President Donald Tusk? And I was like, whoa, I just read that really fucked up. So.
Tusk, politics aside, Donald Tusk is a cool name. Tusk.
It is.
That is a strong sounding.
Is he an elephant?
I'm sure it means king or something in
So yeah, that's pretty much going to do it for our analysis today. I think that's it, right?
Yeah, I think so.
A little bit. We're usually like, it's going to be like, 90 minutes. And then we go for friggin' 120 minutes. But it's been really fun today. One thing that we're doing, Aziz, is encouraging people to vote.
Yes, we're about to record after this episode. We're going to record a little voting spot. Anchor is doing that. They're promoting, creating voting ads, just encouraging people to get out there and vote. And we're going to, as soon as we drop off the live stream, we're going to record our version of that. So if you listen to the podcast version on Anchor, you'll hear our voting ad. If not, well, you all know what voting is. So,
and we won't get too political, but I think we're all for democracy instead of fascism.
We are for democracy. Yes.
Yes,
I think
definitely.
we're all in agreement on that. So I don't think we need to name names or anything like that. But I think that clearly we want everybody to encourage to keep democracy going.
Yes, sir.
I want to thank everybody, of course, for joining us today. It's been super fun doing another episode of the podcast. Like I said, we're going to work towards Sword of Destiny next. So that's exciting. It's really awesome that we've got so far and we finished the last wish.
Yeah, we'll have some more Yennefer in the next story. That's great.
Oh yes,
Yennefer,
I'm very excited for that.
The stories are a bit more wackier. There's a little bit more magic, a little bit more craziness.
Probably more humor, I think, too.
Yeah. Which is great.
It's
for
more.
us,
It's
we
more
like to be-
itself.
Yeah.
It comes into its own a little more, I think.
More creatures, really.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is great for the podcast because we love to laugh, obviously.
Yes, we do. It's one of the main draws for us. We hope it's one of the main draws for you all listening as well. Because otherwise, there's too much of it if you aren't into that.
So we want to thank everyone for joining. Of course, we want to invite you to our Facebook group. We do threads, like Aziz will usually put up a thread, or I'll put up a thread, or Michal put up a thread, and we talk about before the podcast and after the podcast. So we don't just talk about the books, by the way. Me and Ryan will put game posts up there, talk about The Witcher 3. We'll talk about the TV show on there. So we'd like to invite anyone that hasn't joined our Facebook group. You can find the link in the description of this video and come hang out with us. We're usually chatting on there, and we give all of our updates for our next podcast and what we're doing. And we love to, of course, get feedback from all of you on how we can improve the podcast and have more fun and entertain you guys more. We also have the links to Michal and Aziz and all of my social media and where we put out our content in the description of the video. So, Michal, what's actually next for you? What's up with you?
Well, I'm on Twitter, unfortunately. And I've actually we've gotten back into the swing, I guess, of doing my Nice Jewish Fangirls podcast.
Oh, cool.
If that sounds interesting to you. It is exactly what it says in the name. If you want to catch up on old reviews of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., you can check out my Level 7 Access podcast and Vassals of Kingsgrave. Of course, we are talking about all kinds of things all the time over there.
Including The Witcher.
Including The Witcher.
So go check Michal out. Our Twitter, I was going to say my Twitter and her Twitter have been political a lot lately. So if you follow me on Twitter, you might not like all the hate I post for Donald Trump on there. But anyways, Aziz, thank you, Michal. What's next for you, Aziz?
All right. Well, we are in a Valar Rereadus break over on History of Westeros. We start back up a week from Sunday, so that's October 4th, but we're about to drop House Blackwood Part 2. It's already up for patrons. The full release is Sunday, the 27th, and we're going to drop a Defiance of Duskendale episode pretty soon as well. That'll be out around the same time Valar Rereadus is starting back up. So lots happening there. It's a Dance with Dragons, so we're excited for that. And I guess that's about it. Yeah, working on some other stuff with some back-end projects, but we'll announce those when they're closer.
Yeah, for sure. And we usually do the podcast on Fridays, everyone, but we are discussing maybe doing it another day. We'll discuss that internally. And Aziz posts the schedule on there whenever we adjust it if we have to miss a week because of a doctor's appointment or somebody has what's a requirement
Holiday or something like that.
the holiday
yeah.
or something like that. Michal obviously has a religious holiday that she attends. We tried to move the podcast to kind of fit everyone's schedule. So if you do want to check out our schedule, it will be up there, but we're talking about maybe not having it on Fridays and having another day. So we'll make sure that you guys are all updated. Follow us on the podcast Pod of Surprise on Twitter. You can find updates there. And like I said, on Facebook. And yeah, we're just really excited to continue doing this. Like I said, we wish that season 2 was coming a little bit sooner, but it's coming next summer. So
you can't complain.
That's still pretty fast given everything. Yeah.
I will actually be doing a stream on Monday talking about the replacement of Eskel. He's been recast, and Fen and Godringer are going to be cast in season 2. So
Yeah, that's interesting.
It's really interesting. So I'm going to talk about some of Redanian Intelligence has some amazing articles if you want to go check them out now. But I'll be doing a live stream around 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on Monday for some more Witcher show stuff. So thanks everyone for joining us. Aziz?
Yes. Thank you, everybody. Big thank you to Marley, Andrew G, Ryan B, Sam D, James G, and Anonymous for the support on Anchor, and to everyone else who supported live chat, liked and subscribed, upvoted, all those different things. If you leave us a review on iTunes, that's super helpful, especially when we're still pretty small like this. We hope to be a little less smaller in the long run, but hey, if we stay small, that's cool too, because it's all in good fun no matter what.
Yeah, exactly. And like I said, we'll be continue doing this, and we'll give you all of our updates on social media. We really, really appreciate you. If you do want to support the podcast, you can hit that support button on Anchor. The link to our sponsors webpage for the podcast, the downloadable version, is in the description of the video. $1, $5, or $10. If you can't, that's totally cool too. We appreciate you being here and supporting us like this. Thanks everyone for joining. And maybe I think we could sing maybe to finish the podcast. I don't know if we'd want to know.
Yeah, I'm trying this every week.
It never works.
Maybe I'll just do this, the
Why
soundboard.
don't you sing?
Oh, Valley of Plenty, oh,
It was Joey Beatty leading us. It's definitely better.
friend of humanity. Thank you, everyone. We really appreciate you. You have a great, safe, and fun weekend. Bye.
Bye.